Hi everybody, it's Lindsay and I am here today at the start of a brand new series that I'm going to be doing not only on my blog but on my YouTube channel, where I'm going to be covering all the basics of card making. Today I'm going to be starting with basic supplies, and then over the next several weeks I'll be going over the types of stamps that we use in card making, the types of inks, and several basic techniques as well. Now for my basic supplies, these are going to be supplies that I pull out and use on almost every single card that I make. So these aren't going to be specialty supplies or anything like that. This is a really manageable shopping list pretty much of all these supplies that I really feel that you need to make just one simple card. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing in any supply list would be your cardstock. And everyone is going to need white cardstock. I personally don't use the expensive stuff for a variety of reasons, but mostly just because I'm not picky about my cards being thrown away. I feel like cards are disposable. That's just the way I am, and as well, I feel like if my kids go in my supply room, they can just pull some out as they need it, and it's not something that I need to be conservative about. Now I use Georgia Pacific 110 pound cardstock. You can find this at Walmart. And I use 8.5 by 11 sheets. This works really well for making cards. Now, dependent upon your style, you might want colored cardstock and also pattern paper as well. Now, I would recommend, if you want to start with some color cardstock, you can go to different companies and you can buy a sampler pack where they'll have 1 or 2 sheets of all of their colors. This way, you're going to know really what you run out of first, so what you'll be using more often, and then you can repurchase as necessary. Now the next item on my list is a paper trimmer. This is going to be more of a personal choice and what you want out of a paper trimmer. I use this Fiskars paper trimmer. It has a swing arm on it that allows me to cut up to 12 inches. And this works really well for me. It has this little lifting thing. It's got a wire guide that I really love and I use quite often. And the blade comes out and is replaceable. You might find that you want a self-sharpening guillotine type trimmer or a rotary trimmer. However, I have kids and that just wasn't a viable option for me, so this works really well. It's also compact and it stores very easily because I work in a small space. Now I know 2 pairs of scissors and a craft knife is a little excessive. However, each scissor and the craft knife has its own place for card making. I use my long blade scissors, which are 8 inches, and I use these to cut off and when I'm making a card to make my lines flush with each other. So if I'm doing very long trimming, I use these. These are non-stick as well, so that helps once I've already glued things down. Now for these fine detail scissors, these are like a 4-inch blade. They're very short, very pointy. I use these for all of my fussy cutting. I use it to cut out my masks, anything like that. This is what I grab for. Now for my craft knife, I use this when I want to cut out the center of something and I don't want the outline cut on it. So each scissor and the craft knife all have their place, all have their uses, and I really couldn't just pick one that I would go with. So all 3 I think are really good for a basic supply kit. Now for a first ink pad, I would highly suggest a black dye ink pad. Mine is from Simon Says Stamp. Some of the features include a felt ink pad, which is raised up for easier stamping. It is also fade resistant. It is also waterproof, which is really important to me in a dye ink pad. And it's just a really great ink pad to start out with. This is what you're going to be using the most for sentiments, for images that you want to color in with certain types of mediums, which I will get into in a later video, but this is what I find myself reaching for the most often. It is fast drying and doesn't smear as easily as other ink pads. So this is really what I would recommend for a beginning stamper. Now I know the colored ink pads are so pretty and so tempting when you first start stamping, but this is really the one I find myself reaching for the most often. So it's what I would suggest for a basic supply kit. Now, acrylic blocks are something you may or may not need, depending on if you only want to use wood mount stamps, you won't need these. However, if you want to use clear and cling mount stamps, these are what are going to replace your wood mount. So these are what you'll mount your clear and cling stamps onto to be able to stamp them onto your paper. Now, acrylic blocks come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They can come with or without grooves. They come in a variety of widths as well. You can get them with grid lines or without. You can get them in so many different sizes as well. So what I would suggest is buying a fairly cheap starter set that's going to give you a variety of sizes to start with, and then go from there. And this is something you don't need to repurchase, so you can just keep adding and building up your collection as you go along and you find yourself buying more stamps. Now, the next suggestion I have for a basic supply kit is a ruler. I find myself reaching for 2 different rulers, which may seem excessive, but this is just what I find myself reaching for the most often. The first is my Tim Holtz ruler. This is a little bit more expensive than a normal ruler. However, it is worth every single penny. You can see it has a metal edge along this side that is to be used with your craft knife or other cutting tools. A rotary cutter as well would work. But this is just going to allow you to cut with your cutting tools and not tear up your ruler. The other side is tapered, which allows for tearing, which I'll show in a moment, but it also has little punching guides as well, little circles that you can insert a paper piercer in, and that is just going to allow you to paper pierce and have your holes spaced properly. Now, it also starts at 0 on the very end, which most rulers don't, so sometimes you don't get exact measurements if you don't pay attention. However, this one starts at 0 on the very end, and it also zeroes out in the center on one side and goes to 12 inches on the other. You also have grid lines on this that are each 1/4 of an inch, which makes for very easy measuring and centering things. And it also has dash lines in it that go every 1/8 of an inch in between the 1/4 inches. Now here you can see a little bit better on this white piece of paper all those grid lines, and I use them. It's not something that's just there to be pretty. I use them on almost every card. Now this tapered end, you can see I'm using it to tear a piece of 110-pound cardstock, and that gives you a really great torn edge look that some people like on their cards, and it's just a great way to get a nice straight torn edge. Now, the next ruler that I'm going to share with you is only a few dollars, and that's why I'm suggesting 2 rulers, but this one is called a T-square ruler. This is special in that it has a straight edge on the left-hand side, and when you bump this up against your piece of cardstock that has the straight edge, you're going to be able to draw a straight line across. So no measuring or anything with this. I don't use this for any measuring. I strictly use this to draw straight lines, but it's only a few dollars, so that's why I feel it's worth the investment. The next 2 items in my basic supply kit are something you probably already have at home, and that is a pencil and a good eraser. I use different kinds of pencils. You can use mechanical, you can use in straight number 2, you can grab fun, colorful pencils if you want, but I do not use the eraser on my pencils very often at all. I choose to invest in a little bit better eraser. They're fun still, but a pencil and a good eraser are something I use on every single card. The next item I would suggest is a pair of reverse grip tweezers, preferably with a plastic end. Now the reverse grip is going to allow you to pick up objects, and then you can sit them down to the side if you don't need them right away, or if you're tying a bow, this is really helpful as well. Now the plastic end is something I would suggest if you plan on using any heat, like heat embossing or anything else as well, so you don't burn your fingers. Tweezers are something I waited some time to buy, and I really regret that decision, so I would suggest these for a beginning supply kit. Now my next supply is adhesives. I'm going to split this up into 2 different categories, the first being a wet adhesive. My wet adhesive of choice is Glossy Accents. I like this because not only is it a super strong glue that's not going to let up its grip, it's quick drying as well, it also has a variety of techniques you can use it for. You can see I'm putting dots of it down and it adds dimension, so you really get a really fun look with this as well. If you want to put it on top of a colored image, you can also do some masking with this as well. Now the next is a dry adhesive. There are several different dry adhesives. My favorite is from iCraft. It's a tearaway paper tape that is double-sided. It comes in a variety of widths. I have the 0.025 here, and all you do is put a strip of it down, tear away the backing paper, and you can see how strong it really is, and it's very see-through as well. Now this comes in a smaller roll, but I use different widths of it, so I don't go through it as often. Now the next thing I would suggest is a foam tape. Now I don't use this quite as often, but I use it for die cuts a lot. And then what I use in place of my foam adhesive on larger panels is fun foam. And I'm talking about the stuff you get from like the kids section. I use this on larger panels to put through the mail so it doesn't smush down and it doesn't show where my foam tape is. All I do to adhere this is I use that paper tape that you see there. I put a few strips of it down and then I tear it away and use that as my foam tape. And you can see it's about the same width as the foam tape, so you're really not losing much dimension by using this. Now there are a few other supplies that really don't fit into any category that I find myself reaching for on almost every card. The first one is my bone folder. Now this just helps me make my creases nice and sharp. I also use it along with my paper trimmer to do any scoring that I might need to do, and that just saves me from having to store a scoring tool. The next is a sanding block or an emery board, or you can use both. I do, but I use these for a lot of different things actually. The most times I use it, I'm using it to do what you see here, and that is just to take away any little frayed edges you might get. You can see I tore this paper earlier, and it just smooths down that torn line so it's nice and straight and even. I also use these to clear away any smudges from ink and a lot of different other things. These are just really handy tools to have. Now my final thing is Postit Notes. I don't have any video of these, of what you can do, but there are so many different things. You can use these to hold down your dies, to run them through your die cutting machine. You can also use them for masking things or note taking. These are just one of the items that I always keep in my craft room that I find myself reaching for time and time again, and they're so cheap. It's great to have in your toolkit. And that finishes off all the supplies I would suggest for a basic starter supply kit. If you are looking for any of the supplies I talked about in the video today, they are all linked over on my blog. You can find that link in the description box below, as well as that eye in the top right hand corner. That will take you there too. I've also got more information on all the supplies over there and more things that I use them for as well. I will be continuing this series over the next several weeks, but if there are some certain videos or certain techniques that you want more information about, you can leave a comment down below or on my blog, and I will see what I can do about getting a video out there for that as well. And if you don't want to miss any of the videos that I have out, you can subscribe to my channel, and that will notify you whenever a new video is uploaded. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!